wanted to do this little Facebook Live because as schools are closing next week, I've had a few people ask me about what we do for like our schedule, or helping my kids get along, or how to get them to listen to me, because they're going to be home all day, and I've been homeschooling for a while, so I've had a few questions, and I thought I would share some of the thoughts I've had, hopefully with some of the experiences I've had that I didn't work out so well, give you some tips. I'm gonna title this little video my secret to homeschool success, because I think that that's what I want to really focus on. But I want to tell you some of the things that didn't work when I got started, and hopefully you don't make some of the same mistakes. So I remember I had this idea in my mind of what it would look like, right? So I had pictured that I had a schedule, at 8:15 we were going to do math, and at 9 o'clock we were going to do our language arts, and then 9:30 history, so we had a basic, school schedule in my to-do list there. And then I had cut out like all these little animals that we were going to classify into different groups, and we're going to memorize the different families and all these things, so I had this ideal, and we're going to all sit around together and do it, and it was just going to be so happy. And so I got up that morning ready to go, and we started, and at first they kind of enjoyed it, playing school, it was kind of fun. But then as the day wore on and I was having them do more, it started kind of getting a little tedious. And then by the time I got to the animals, I pulled them out, and I remember I was like, okay, here, they thought they were cute, they kind of were interested, and then I showed them, these are invertebrates and these are the vertebrates, and how you tell them apart, and started separating them. But then it got kind of just boring, and I had all these things that I wanted to make sure that they knew, and they just weren't interested. So they're kind of fighting or teasing and not listening to me, and I was feeling like they weren't being very respectful, so I started kind of threatening and bribing and trying to figure things out that way, and it wasn't working. And by 3 o'clock we were cleaning our house, and in my schedule that was supposed to have been done at 11, and I was just like, this was such a failure. The day was not at all how I had pictured. It wasn't happy, they didn't like it, and I didn't like it, and it was stressful, and I can't do this. And at the time we didn't have Facebook, but we had these Yahoo groups. So I remember reaching out to the homeschool group in our community through Yahoo, and I just said, this is how my day went. It was really hard. How do you guys do this? And one of the moms said, I suggest that you go into your kids' rooms tonight when they're sleeping and watch them for a while and remember why you started. And I thought that was interesting advice, but I tried it, and I went in the room, and I remember watching them for a while and just being filled with so much love for them. And it really motivated me to try again the next day. And so I tried again, and little by little I started to understand what an education was. I had kind of thought, I had read a lot of books before that about what it was, but I had kind of pictured them being filled with a lot of good information, right? So I was going to teach them stuff, and they're going to learn it, And I came to see that it wasn't just filling their heads with facts and knowledge, but it was more about teaching them to love people, to love one another, and to serve each other, and to develop their gifts and talents so that they could. And as we started to have that be our focus, my kids became more and more self-motivated. It wasn't about passing tests anymore, right? Or getting a perfect ACT score, and if one of my kids did want to get a perfect ACT score, I'd get them the resources for that and help them with that personal goal. But that wasn't going to be my focus or our focus as a family. It was going to be to serve. And once that became the focus, things got a lot easier, because it was about them and their learning to help. And so I'm going to share 3 tips to help us raise self-motivated children. And I have a lot to say about this. I have a website that's pretty much about this, and my book is pretty much about this. And so if you have other questions, or I'd love to help, you can ask them on the comments, or on the website. I have a mini course that you can take that's 5 days, that you can reply to the emails that you get sent, and I can answer questions that way as well. But my 3 tips, the first one is to help them realize that their education is their responsibility, right? So it's easy for them to think that it's your responsibility or the teacher's responsibility. But if we can help them see that we're there to support them and to help them and to give them the resources that they need, but ultimately they need to take responsibility for it, because they will not learn like they may learn some facts and figures if we give them bribes or things and give them grades, but they won't retain them necessarily or use them. They won't become part of their character if they haven't chosen them. And so, and they need to see that that's what their job is to choose it. And once they understand that, then they will be more apt to want to choose it. We won't be forcing it down their throat, right? So an example of this, when one of my sons had a really hard time learning to read. For some reason, that was a skill that was really difficult for him. And when he was around 8.5, I started really worrying, like he's really not reading much, and he's way past when he's supposed to be reading. So I started getting a little more pushy about it, and I'd be like, okay, at this time we're gonna do reading lessons every day because you really have to pick this up. And so I would push, and then the time would come, and I'd be like, it's reading lesson time, and he would cry, and it was just not working well. And so finally I realized this is not a good approach, and I just said, okay, I am ready to help you learn how to read. And when you're ready to learn, then you let me know. And you be prayerful about it. Just decide when is a good time, and when you're ready, we'll work on this. But I'm not going to push you anymore. And he was relieved, and he was like, oh, good, I don't have to do reading lessons anymore. And a couple of months went by, and he finally came to me, and he said, okay, I think I'm ready to learn to read. And so we would pick up the book, and I would help him with his reading lessons. And when he'd get frustrated and didn't want to continue, I'd be like, okay, well, we'll try again tomorrow. You don't have to keep going. And a lot of times that in itself, that he had the choice, he would say, no, I want to go a little longer, because he felt he was free, right? And he learned to read, and within a year, he was reading really difficult books like Lord of the Rings, things that most kids his age weren't yet reading, because he had chosen it, right? And I've seen this over and over again with my kids, that once they choose it, they pick it up so quickly and they just thrive with it. It becomes part of who they are, because it wasn't me pushing it, it was them choosing it. So that's really important, that they understand that they have to choose it. Would be my first tip in helping them be self-motivated. And then the next thing would be here I wrote these down so that I wouldn't forget what I was going to say. To give them time to wonder about things and to be curious and to be bored, right? Like a lot of times we think we got to entertain them all the time. And so we put them, in front of screens, or we get them entertaining games and toys so that they'll be entertained. But a lot of times that's a disservice to them, because I have one friend that when her child says, I'm bored, she says, oh, that is so good, because boredom is the way to creativity. And I think that that's so true. So take them out in nature. There's a lot of things to be curious about in nature. Read lots of stories, because that sparks their imagination and helps them be curious about other things and events. And then just let them be bored sometimes. That will help them want to learn more and do more. So that would be tip number 2, is to be okay with them being bored and encouraging them. And of course, sometimes they get whiny and naggy, and if they're intruding in your personal time and space, it's okay to set boundaries and say, if you want to be whiny, you can go do that in your room, but I don't need to hear it. Set some boundaries for yourself so that they're not completely making you feel down and tempting you to put them in front of the screen. But also be okay with that boredom, because it's good for them. And that's how they start to understand who they are, and to start wondering about what they enjoy, and to really start delving into their own gifts and talents when they have that space. So having that space is really important. And then the third tip that I want to share is to don't put your agenda on them. Don't set up like a schedule like I did that first day that didn't work so well, and say, this is what you're going to do each day. Usually that doesn't go over very well. I would suggest that you get together with them, and you ask them what they're interested in learning about, and help them set their own schedule. So I think it's really good to also make it a matter of prayer. So get one-on-one and just say, let's pray together and figure out together what your schedule will look like, now that we're going to be home, and what it is that you ought to be learning and what you want to learn. And so you pray, and then for our kids, I encourage them to do a little reading, a little writing, and a little math every day. And then I ask them what they're interested in, what they want to learn more about. And all of them have different things. And so like one of my sons, it's violin. He wants to make sure he practices that every day. And he has a couple other things. And another one is really into logic puzzles right now. So he put that on his skills, whose skills we call them, and he wants to do a little bit of that every day because he is really interested in that. And my daughter's piano, she has that on her list. And so just kind of make a little list with each of them about the things they're interested in and that you feel inspired that they need to be doing. But don't make it extensive, right? A lot of times when we're starting, we think, well, we got to make sure you're doing art and math and writing and history every day. That's not necessary. They will learn that as you know, as they have space and time. I have two daughters that are really good artists, and we've never done an art curriculum, but they just doodle when I'm reading or different things, and they've loved it and they've picked it up and chosen to learn it. So I think as long as they're doing a little reading, writing, and math every day and choosing their own things, you're okay. We do history as a family, so I don't have that be something that they write down in their personal goals. I'll just read them a little history story, and that sparks their imagination, right? Or sometimes science. I'll do a little science lesson on the days I'm not doing history to also spark their curiosity. So we don't add that to their goals either because we're doing that as a family. But they make their own personal academic goals that way. So if you get together and make goals together, that usually goes over a lot better than, putting your agenda on them and making sure that they do what you think that they ought to do or what the school says they're supposed to do. And of course that might be different depending on your school district. They might have certain assignments that they need to do, but you can also encourage them to do those, in their own time or how they hope to get them accomplished without pushing necessarily an agenda. So that would be my third tip, is to plan that out together. So I guess that would be my secret to homeschool success, is just to teach them to be self-motivated, because then they have the intrinsic love that comes from learning because they're doing it themselves. No one's pushing it on them. And then you also have more time to pursue your own interests and talents because you're not using it all on pushing and nagging and getting them to do the stuff that you think they need to do. So I hope that that's helpful. If you have any other questions about it, I do have my website that has more tips, the mini course that talks a lot about how to teach your kids self-motivation, or to be self-motivated. And really that's what my book is about. I'm currently working on the book that's going to be for the children themselves, to work along with you so that you can work on this motivation as a family, to everyone be united in doing your part in making the world a better place and being motivated that way. So, thanks for listening and for being here. And if you have questions, later on, if you watch this later, then, hi, Callie, thanks. That's a nice comment. If you watch this later, then feel free to write any questions that you may have. I'm happy to answer anything that you may be struggling with as you're trying to transition into having your kids home more often through this little, virus thing we have going on. So, I will talk to you later. Bye.